All right. Hello, everyone. Happy Friday. Nick Morrow, DFS here with Occupy Fantasy. This time to help you break down not only the DFS slate, but the entire UFC Nashville card set to take place tomorrow. Yeah, like the video, subscribe to the channel. Definitely appreciate you getting in here on a Friday night. And yeah, this is the second time we've run the show, so still kind of working out a few bugs, the flow, everything else. But what I'm going to do is go through each fight one at a time, kind of give you guys my takes in terms of who I think is going to win, what I'm seeing on film in studying for this card, and then I'll also tie in some DFS takes as well. I've got a great team behind me. We got Derek, Brian, and the guys working the model, the plug, everything else. And yeah, look above me right here. If you want to become a member, one of the cheapest entry points in the DFS industry, best bang for your buck by far. UFC slate breakdown, occupied model ownerships, projections, multi lineup builder as well. If you're looking to mass multi enter, and what better way to start this stream than with the screenshot here? And I know that is on the screen with my cartoon picture. Not trying to steal any valor. This is Brian's screenshot here, and I know he's not as happy about it as many winning 8,000 would be because he was only a few points out of first place. But very, very sharp. He got on Josh Van as his captain here. Obviously, Van pulled that fight off against Royval. I was pretty bullish on Royval on the stream. I mean, that fight was amazing. Honestly, can't feel too bad about it. But the only guy who beat him actually stacked the matchup, but really just kind of shows how well the model did on that card. Van, Taporia, McKinney were, I believe, three of the top plays in terms of OF index. Always good to get a guy like Alvin Hines in there too, just for the everyman. But yeah, shouts out to Brian, just an amazing lineup here. It just really shows you why the tools are so valuable. But yeah, guys, definitely any questions, get them in, whether they're DFS related, fight related, betting related. At the end of the video, I will actually plug some of my own favorite bets on this card. Some safer, quote unquote, nothing's ever safe in MMA, and then a few kind of long shots as well. I'm going to try to keep it under an hour at the very least, hopefully closer to 45 minutes, but we got 13 fights, actually 12 fights to go through here. So let's go ahead and get right into it. Yeah, starting here, we got a very interesting main event, a bit of a changing of the guard. Before I get into the fighter breakdown, I do want to just kind of talk about the state of the UFC's heavyweight division. It's bad. And honestly, heavyweight is a selling point for any combat sport. But the UFC's heavyweight division right now is about as bad as it's ever been. And that's saying a lot because they've had a lot of tough stretches. But yeah, I mean, a guy like Teixeira, only his second UFC fight, getting a main event here against Derek Lewis. They are desperate to build some names in this division. Obviously, John Jones now retired. Maybe he'll come back for that White House card. That's a whole other conversation. But what we do know is we got Aspinall at the top. Only a handful of guys who maybe even give him a little bit of a run for his money, and then he gets ugly. Like 10 to 15 isn't even great. There's a few guys on this card. Kennedy Njokuani, who struggled at light heavyweight. I think he's already ranked at heavyweight. It just really kind of tells you the state of the division that Teixeira's popping in here in his second UFC fight, getting a main event in front of a crowd. They would love to build his name. And in handicapping, I'm obviously looking at film, we're looking at resumes, everything else. But when you kind of think about what the UFC wants, that's important here as well. I will say they probably would prefer Teixeira get a win. It gets an interesting name inside that top 10, and they're desperate for them right now. So, yeah, let's get right into it here. Uh, Let's see. Taliesin Teixeira right now, most book voting around minus 240, minus 260. What's notable about him, we only have the one fight here in his game log, is that all of his wins have come via first round finish. So one might say, what does that mean about his cardio? I mean, it hasn't really mattered to this point. I will say he was in kind of this modified rules fight. You can find it on YouTube where he was extended a bit. Listen to interviews of other guys in his gym. They all say he has the cardio. Not the best build in terms of like muscle, stature, etc. Don't necessarily need it at heavyweight. Does seem to be fast. Does look like an athlete in spite of his massive height. And yeah, top plays in the occupied model. His OF index score is as good as any on the slate. Looking at ownership as well here, second highest don't play on the slate at 42%. So if you're rostering Teixeira, I think you do want to get a lot of them. It probably would be wise to get a little bit of Derek Lewis in your life here as well. So what I'll say about Lewis, yes, he's getting up there in age, but heavyweight's a little bit different. You can kind of fight competitively at the top of the division for a long time. It's very different than the lower weight classes where speed is very, very important. At heavyweight, power is very important, and power It's a cliche, is the last thing to go. We look at some of these recent wins he's had and where he's priced. I mean, underdog against Rodrigo de Lima came out with that flying knee, really good performance there. Nascimento, not the best fight. But he did eventually get the KO, priced at 8,400, pretty much at value. But when he's losing, he's either getting starched, kind of quitting, or getting taken down repeatedly, like we saw against Almeida. In this particular matchup, I actually think on the money line, where we're looking at Derek Lewis around plus 200 or better, he's probably the value side. But for DFS, I would rather have Teixeira, I think, in a lot of lineups. At the same time, a lot of ownership on Teixeira, so in high risk contests, it's probably wise to maybe get a little bit of Lewis into your exposures. So yeah, what else is there to say about this one? Teixeira, known as a striker, there's kind of narrative going around this week. He used to have BJJ in his Instagram handle. Apparently, he is a pretty good grappler. Haven't really seen it anywhere on film. Guess we just have to trust that that's true. I think he does have a win via armbar or something like that against a very low level opponent. Not necessarily something I think he'll need to go to here. Lewis in the past, it's kind of tough to gauge him in this matchup because he's had success against tall fighters, 3-0 against fighters over 6'5". The only notable one of that group, though, is Alexander Volkov. Fight he was kind of dominated in until he found the late KO. But he doesn't do well against pressure. And Teixeira does seem to be the type of guy who's willing to come forward. But in that same breath, Teixeira is also a guy who, in coming forward, is going to take a lot of shots and exchanges. And these stats are super skewed. We're only looking at 2 fights. But Teixeira, 14.6 significant strikes landed per minute, obviously, very small sample size. But he's also absorbing more than 7. So he's getting in firefights, which isn't always the best idea against Lewis, but that makes this a volatile matchup if that's what we're going to expect to happen here. So as much as I do like Teixeira and will say he has the highest ceiling maybe on the entire slate, the model is certainly telling us that, it would be wise to get some exposure to Lewis. This is not a fight I would ever consider stacking. In a perfect world, one of these guys is getting knocked out very early. We'll talk about it, some best bets and things like that later on. But yeah, definitely a fight you want exposure to. Just keep in mind Teixeira, one of the more popular plays on the entire slate. Lewis getting some love, maybe not as much as he should, though. So I do want to get some exposure to him. Excuse me. But this is a guy who does go overlooked a lot. I mean, we're looking at some of the recent prices on him and some of his recent fights, just pulling this up on my other monitor here. But yeah, only a minus 160 favorite against Nascimento, who I don't rate really highly at all. Slight favorite over Rodrigo de Lima. Underdog to Spivak, rightfully so, as that's a grappler. But yes, I mean, Chris Daukaus was a favorite over him. And this fight does remind me a little bit of that fight is kind of broken in the UFC. Certainly not the physical specimen that Teixeira is in terms of height, reach, etc. But everyone was talking about how good his footwork was, how great he was as a striker, how he's really good at kind of rushing opponents. And Lewis embarrassed him. Albeit that was in the Apex cage in front of a home crowd. This is going to be a bigger cage here. But when you get 2 guys this big, fireworks are coming. So I think either way, whether you go to Lewis or Teixeira, you probably want one of them if you're only playing a lineup. I will say Teixeira the safer play. And at 9K, I actually do think he's one of the better upside plays that are expensive on this slate. There are more 9Ks plus plays on this slate on DK than we're used to seeing. So you do have to make some tough decisions here. But I will say, in terms of upside for a cheap underdog, Lewis also very appealing. So I know I'm kind of on both sides of the fence here. I will say I think Lewis is kind of the value side. My gut's telling me maybe he's the pick. But if he gets finished quickly by Teixeira, you're definitely going to want Teixeira in your lineup. So we'll talk more about that fight as we start to talk through builds. Definitely one of the fights you're going to want exposure to, regardless of which side you're on. The model is telling us to be on the Teixeira side, but keep in mind, the field is very much on the Teixeira side as well. Second highest on play on the entire slate. I will get to Chapin for the sake of time. I'm just going to go right into the co-main event here. We have another interesting matchup, another kind of changing of the card, quote unquote. That's kind of the theme of this card. Some of these guys are older, really talented guys with great resumes against some interesting up-and-comers who I think the UFC is trying to build. But here we have Gabriel Bonfim, not to be confused with his brother Ishmael, taking on Stephen Thompson, who is still one of the better strikers in the division, even as he gets into his 40s. His karate style has really allowed him to extend his career. Very much a hit and don't get hit type of fighter. We saw his last time out against Buckley. He was actually looking great in that fight, kind of pulling ahead on the scorecards until he did eventually get caught. A lot of Thompson's fights in his career have kind of gone that way. We go back to the Anthony Pettis fight, a fight he was doing really well in, until he got caught late in that one as well. We've seen him KO'd. Though, his path to victory here is likely going to come via the grappling. Pulling up some statistics on my other monitor. Yeah, I think this is a very binary fight. And again, when I talk about binary, I think you could go one of two ways. On the feet, Thompson is going to be the much better striker, really solid striking defense, does a great job. We've seen it against Kevin Holland, we've seen it against a ton of fighters, just really good at managing distance and kind of picking opponents apart at range. But the hole in his game is certainly that grappling. I mean, Bilal Muhammad, Gilbert Burns, Shavkat Rakhmonov, all able to get nice wins over him, leaning on the grappling. And Gabriel Bonfim is a fighter who secures 3.68 takedowns per 15 minutes. 76% accuracy is actually really solid. And unlike some of the other grapplers we're going to talk about on this card, I think his striking is serviceable enough that he should be able to close distance here. So initially, kind of coming into the week, looking at the money line, I'm like, man, I already kind of like Lewis as a dog. There's a lot of underdog on this card I like. Do I really want to take a shot on Thompson? I will say I think he's being disrespected on the money line. But for me, I don't think it's enough for me to kind of flip and pick the underdog. I do think Bonfim probably gets it done. He's going to be my pick here. Taking a look at ownership over on my other monitor once again, 28% on DK, 37 over on FanDuel. Not that popular compared to some of the other expensive options. Stephen Thompson, actually one of the cheaper plays on the entire slate. The issue with Thompson is if this fight were to go to the decision, the highest volume striker, that point kickboxing style doesn't always fare well. He did good against Holland. That was a 5-round fight, though. I mean, had a good win over Neal where he scored really well, Luque as well, but definitely getting up there in age, definitely slowing down, and definitely going to be kind of, I don't know, circling away from Bonfim a lot here. Also, having to defend takedowns hurts his upside. So, if you're desperate for value, I don't mind Thompson. I will say at plus 300, he's live as an underdog. But if the best version of Bonfim shows up, I do think he's going to be able to lean on a grappling heavy game plan and likely get this done. I actually think he's under owned compared to some of the other top plays here. As far as betting it, I really don't like the money line. I don't necessarily want to bet him inside the distance either. So probably a fight I just avoid in terms of betting. But yeah, a fun one at that. And again, if Thompson does get the win here, unlike another few fighters on this card, since he's not going to retire, I mean, Karate Combat is now a promotion that he would definitely thrive in. There's other places he could go, the likes of PFL, etc. Shouts out Don here. Long time no see. Appreciate you, Don. Good to have you here. He says he does have some Lewis, Curtis, Bonfim, Landwehr. We're going to talk through all of these, but off the top of my head, I do like the Curtis call. I do like Kennedy. Landwehr, another live dog, similar price to Thompson. I will say, I do think Landwehr probably more live for the upset than maybe even Thompson is. And playing large field, definitely the way to go in MMA. But you got to lean into the chaos, right? This is one of the least predictable sports, just because anything can happen. Guys get injured. And I'll use that as a segue to talk about Calvin Kattar here against Steve Garcia, because the one knockout on Calvin Kattar's record, he was finished due to a leg injury. So everyone here wants to get to Garcia, and I get it, right? Pulling up the graphics from the model, highest projected ownership, 46%. I think he looks really well in terms of how he's going to score here. But as one of the more popular plays on the slate, I would like to get away from him. At the same time, when he's winning 8,400, 110 points, 108, 95, 94, 133, he is on a tear in terms of DFS upside. Nelson, Choi, Costa, all pretty solid wins. Nerdum and then a little bit different version of Hooper than we're seeing now at 155 pounds, but really solid win streak. At the same time, and I was talking about this with Brian earlier, or Derek actually, in DMs. And I was just saying, I look at Garcia's win streak, and I think that every single one of these guys that he beat and finished, Kattar could have done the same. Maybe not finished because he's not the same power striker, but which of these five do you think would be Kattar? And obviously, we don't want to play MMA math too much, but we look at Cater's recent results. That's a law fight. He came on in the third round after a really long layoff, had to shake off some rust. And I'll say this, like, ring rust is real, but it's nuanced. I'll say it matters more for strikers that need their timing, these technical boxers. And that's exactly what Kattar is. Struggled against Sterling, really tough matchup against the grappler. And then Arnold Allen, that's where he injured his knee. But I think people are looking at that KO and thinking that maybe he's chinny getting up there in age. I don't necessarily think so. He had some big shots against Emmett, a fight I actually thought he got robbed in. Obviously, the Holloway battering was about as brutal of a loss as you'll ever see, but stayed in there for 5 rounds and then dominated Giga in the following fight. So Yeah, I mean, Kattar, is he getting up there in age? Yes, that's a fact. I can't deny it. Who is on the hot streak right now? It's Steve Garcia. Can't deny it. Who has more upside as a DFS play? Steve Garcia, especially with the price kind of closely. But if I'm being completely honest, I think the pick here for me is going to be Calvin Kattar. 53% striking defense. Like I said, underrated durability. I don't think we're going to see many takedowns here, but he does have a near 80% takedown defense as well. And like I said, started slow against the law, but had to chase him around for that third round. But he was landing really well. And as good as Garcia has looked, we've seen him rocked against some pretty questionable opponents in the past. I mean, he's winning these fights, but he's getting in these kind of battles against guys that aren't necessarily as technical as a Calvin Kattar. I mean, Ontiveros had him wobbled. The loss against Machat via KO, obviously aging terribly. And I don't want to go back so many years to talk about Garcia, given the improvements we've seen from him. But at the same time, I mean, if he's going to rely on the KO against a guy who hasn't really been knocked out truly in Calvin Kattar, who's been taking on a much higher level of opponent in Calvin Kattar, it's tough for me to want to play Steve Garcia as the highest don't play on the slate in large field contests. In low risk stuff, I do get it. He's underpriced for his upside. I also like that Cater's been training at TriStar with the Zahabis. I'm from Boston. I mean, we got some good fighters out here, but the gyms are just small. So him kind of going to that bigger camp in Canada, getting good looks. We've seen an improved version of Rob Font as well. Those guys are longtime training partners. It's enough for me to like Kattar here. And again, looking at ownership, I think that's part of what's driving it. The price is part of what's driving it. If Garcia comes and steamrolls in, will I be shocked? Absolutely not. But at the same time, I just see the value on the Kattar side here. Call me crazy, come back and tell me I'm a moron if it doesn't go my way. But at plus money, I like him. I think he can extend this fight, and if Garcia's not going to find that KO, it's going to be very competitive. And Kattar is the better technical striker of the two. Going into another really interesting fight here, not priced nearly as close. We got Morgan Charriere, the French pirate, taking on Nate Landwehr. Love Nate Landwehr. Everyone does. One of everyone's favorite underdogs to cheer for. He famously said, "What if you're whooping my ass, that means I'm going to whoop yours," or something like that. We've seen him come back after getting rocked against a few guys in the past. I mean, the Embers fight especially seemed outclassed there until he took over. The Onama fight as well just showed ridiculous durability. He was outclassed in a big way last time out against Choi. That surprised a lot of people, but Choi really leaned on the grappling in a big way. Morgan Charriere, definitely the better athlete, younger fighter, faster, more well-rounded, more power. And again, I get why he's the favorite. He probably should be here, but at the same time, he fights the very narrow margins. Falling to Nate Wood, I mean, the wins over Miranda, Zucchini, these are guys that are no longer on the roster. I don't rate them well, but we don't have it here. But you could go back to his Cage Warriors days. This is just a guy who fights on extremely narrow margins. His volume kind of depletes as his fights wear on, and that's kind of exactly the type of fight that Nate Landwehr likes to win. I think Charriere wins the first round at an extremely high clip here. But yeah, I think the books know that. So if you're looking for a live entry, maybe not the best place. Landwehr does need to kind of mind his P's and Q's. He is a little chinny, although most of the times he's been KO'd, has come against knees. But yeah, I'm kind of interested in him as a dog. Charriere, not a guy who usually scores all that well unless he is finding the KO. So yeah, I think Charriere is the rightful favorite. I think at low ownership, there's some merit to getting to him in tournaments. And yeah, as much as I like Landwehr, probably a little bit more popular than he should be, pushing 30% on DK. 25 to 30 over on FanDuel as well for a near plus 300 favorite. This line has closed a lot, though. I think a lot of people are with me in thinking that Landwehr is a very live dog. He almost always is. Could he get finished early? Sure, it's certainly possible. But another little intangible to speak on here, he is going to be fighting in front of his home crowd. We're going to hear the chants of USA. This is a guy, again, who kind of needs to get hit a few times to wake up and then take over. And he's well-rounded, underrated grappler. We saw that in the submission win over Ludwig Kline, who a lot of people rate highly. But yeah, I just think the line's a little too wide. I think Landwehr's live for the upset. I like his upside as a cheap play in DFS. But at the same time, I understand Charriere checks all the boxes as far as being a favorite. They've both been taking on kind of a similar level of competition, so I won't dig into that too deeply. Landwehr, again, didn't look great his last time out, but more so outclassed on the mat than he was at striking range. And as good as Charriere is, tends to fight to the level of his opponent, which is not something you want to do against Landwehr, who tends to kind of build as his fights wear on. Once again, appreciate everyone being here. I'm going to take a quick look at chat. Again, like the video, subscribe to the channel, all that good stuff. Definitely check the links in the description below. Samuel here saying welcome back. Appreciate you, Sam. Definitely good to have you. And yeah, this should be a fun card, guys. I mean, we're off last week, going to be in front of a crowd in Nashville. A lively bunch there. Should be really fun. And yeah, main card here. Another fight we have, a really interesting one between Austin Lane and Vitor Petrino. So Petrino is one of these guys who is better than maybe, I don't know, the sum of his parts doesn't necessarily add up to what he should be, if that makes sense. I mean, he has good grappling, he has good striking, but does he mix it well? Not necessarily. He's kind of struggled. KO'd against Dustin Jacoby, obviously ran into that guillotine against Anthony Smith. He is moving up a weight class here. So again, that point I talked about to start the video about how the UFC is starving for heavyweights. Not only are they trying to build up some of these new up and comers through the contender series, out of the promotion, etc. Some of these light heavyweights are moving up as well. Not that light heavyweight's a super deep division, but I do think they'd like to see him probably find a win here. When he is winning, he's scoring pretty well. I will say the Tyson Pedro fight, I had a bet on him inside the distance. Super, super frustrating to see him not get that done. And again, another theme on this card, there's a lot of guys who, if the best version of them shows up, they can kind of justify their price. But we've seen poor versions of this guy come in and fight time and time again. He looks good at heavyweight, but you have to wonder if he really bulked up properly or it's just, I don't want to cut the weight anymore. I think it's hurting my durability. I think he's young enough that he can make the jump. And I also kind of like the matchup for him against Austin Lane. Austin Lane's biggest win, obviously, over Spain, where he was able to get his grappling going. Former Jacksonville Jaguar football player. UFC has not really done him many favors. And as far as durability goes at heavyweight, certainly not a strong suit for him. I can see him maybe scoring some early takedowns, but at the same time, Petrino, not a bad grappler in his own right, obviously ran into that guillotine against Anthony Smith, but that is not necessarily something you're worrying about against Austin Lane. And while Lane did dominate the Spaniard in that fight, wasn't able to finish him on the mat. I do rate Petrino much, much higher in terms of an actual UFC fighter. 71% takedown defense, excuse me. Plenty of power in his strikes. And I do prefer his durability moving up at heavyweight, even though he's coming off that KO loss to Jacoby. So the price here is off. I don't know. Like, there's dogs on this card I can talk myself into. Austin Lane just doesn't do enough for me, honestly. I think he's too chinny. Like, even if he's losing the first round and a half, 2 rounds, he could get caught pretty quickly. Petrino, we've seen it before. I mean, kind of builds into his fights. Never looks great early, but yeah, as his fights wear on, I mean, he does tend to find that button against inferior competition, and that's where I have Austin Lane in terms of what I'm rating him as. So yeah, I do like Petrino here. I think the money line especially is ridiculous. I wouldn't be betting it at all. Like, if you're building parlays on this card, I don't feel great about looking for minus 650 for this guy in Petrino, who we've seen 2 versions of him. But as far as DFS goes, does have plenty of upside. He's just in the same range as some of these other guys we like, right? So the Bonfims, the Teixeiras of the world, it's kind of tough to want to pay for Petrino, and we have these others up there, but I'm pretty sure the field's kind of following that same thought process, which is keeping his ownership somewhat reasonable. No, not at all, actually. On FanDuel, he's underpriced, $19, 51%. TK, 35%. So yeah, I think I'd rather play some of these other expensive plays than Petrino. I do think he wins. I do think he probably finds the KO, but maybe not right away. Maybe he's taken down a few times. So someone who's overpriced. Is Lane cheap enough that I want to get to him? Because of what this card looks like, I'd say no. I think there's enough live underdogs that I don't really need to take that type of risk. It could work out. We did see last week, going back to Brian's win, that win for Alvin Hines, even in a loss, 55 points for one of the cheapest fighters on the slate was enough to nearly be optimal. Won him a K in a $15 contest. So certainly, if you think something like that could happen here, maybe this fight gets extended, you're going to want to be on the dog even in a loss. But for me, Lane, not necessarily someone with that type of durability. Hines, if anything, tough dude, took a ton of shots, kept moving forward. I don't think Austin Lane is that same type of fighter necessarily. Maybe he proves me wrong. Petrino's aside for me here. I do want some exposure, but I think he's a little bit owned. Another fight between a couple guys who we can't necessarily trust. Junior Tafa doing the opposite of what I'm talking about and going from heavyweight down to light heavyweight. Hasn't been impressive. Really terrible grappler. That's the biggest hole in his game. Good striker on the feet, has that glory kickboxing background, does have KO power. He is quick, decent footwork, but at the same time, I mean, inconsistent, a little bit chinny. Again, terrible grappler, and he's taking on a fighter here in Tokkos, who I don't rate all that highly, but I do think he's capable of maybe securing a few takedowns. Tokkos doesn't look great, right? He did survive a decision against Sterling, submitted by Omar Sy, and against this superior grappler. Obviously, not what he's going to be dealing with here. Doesn't look great, and he's actually undersized for light heavyweight. So I do think Tafa is going to be the much bigger fighter here, even though they're listed at the same height. I just think in terms of musculature, etc., we're going to see a big difference in size. But Tuco's averages nearly 3 takedowns per 15 minutes. If he can find a few takedowns, I think he's live to either submit or grind Tafa out for a decision. I don't trust either of these guys. I will say that. These are two low-level fighters. I think the upside's on the Tafa side. Obviously, if you can find that early KO, Toko's not super durable. But I didn't even finish saying it. Tuco's a little bit underrated. Do I think he's good? No. But he does train at Killcliff FC with the likes of Brendan Allen, a few other really solid partners. They like him. They've all really touted him even before he made it into the UFC. He's had a pretty disappointing run so far. But this is a fight I can see going either way. I'm really not confident in either side. I'm going to pick Tafa, I think, just because he does look really good moving down to light heavyweight. Maybe he made some improvements in his grappling defense. And if this fight is standing, he's going to outclass Duco by a large, wide margin. Minus 180 favorite, minus 170 some books. The site I'm looking at actually doesn't have DK odds right now, which is frustrating. But regardless, volatile fight, probably one you want exposure to. But at the same time, I can't sit here and say this is something I'm bullish on. I could see it going long if Tukos is getting early takedowns. I could see Tafa finishing him quickly. It just, there's so many different ways this could go. So again, just not a fight I want to be over invested on. I'm going to lean Tafa. I do think Tukos is interesting as value, though. Certainly a live dog. A fight where I am much more confident in the favorite. We have Chris Curtis here taking on Max Griffin. Theme of the card, another fighter moving a weight class. Curtis has had mixed results at 185 pounds, coming off 2 losses. A fight against Brendan Allen over 5 rounds, which I actually thought he maybe won. Didn't look great against Kopylov, but he was competitive, and some people had him up on the cards before he was finished in the 3rd round there. Fighter kind of known for his durability, usually moving down a weight class, not necessarily a good thing. But he's taken on an opponent in Griffin who's kind of even more past his prime. When you're getting outstruck by Michael Chiesa, that's just not a good sign, in my opinion. Did secure that win over Wells. I mean, he's been competitive, not super active, though, taking on a lower level opponent compared to Curtis. And again, Curtis up at 185 and competitive. He's going to start to, I don't know, outsize some of his opponents if he can get on a little bit of a run here. Griffin's big. At the same time, I do think just the better technical striking for Curtis is going to be enough to get it done. I don't think Griffin has the wrestling to take Curtis down. We saw the Rodolfo Vieira fight. I mean, Vieira shot a million takedowns. Curtis is just not an easy guy to drag to the mat. I mean, Allen was able at times, I think Kopylov as well, but still an 82% takedown defense in the UFC. Griffin averages just over 1 takedown per 15 minutes, and I think it's going to be tough for him in this matchup. Again, Curtis, much higher volume in the striking. I do still think he has solid enough durability to survive here. Griffin, not really the one-shot KO type power we need to worry about in backing Curtis as a favorite. And at 9,100, I like that he has volume. I like that he's live for the finish. And a little bit of an intangible, I like that Sean Strickland's back in his corner. Both these guys are mainstays at Extreme Couture. They kind of had a falling out. But Curtis is a killer when Sean's in his ear, telling him he's a little bitch, for lack of a better word. So I do actually like Curtis here to get it done. If he doesn't find the KO, though, he's overpriced. I got to look at the FanDuel price. Yeah, I think he's more appealing over on FanDuel for sure. Under-owned at just $17. No one's playing him on DK because he's not a guy who usually finds fast knockouts. But if he can extend the fight, I mean, we saw Hawes Allen, some nice wins there where he was kind of down early and came back. He does put out enough volume, but you probably need the knockdown and the finish for him to hit value. Can he get it here? Maybe. I actually think betting him to win by finish is probably a better way to try to make money on Chris Curtis than to be rostering him heavily here. Over 9K on DK, but I do think he gets it done. Another really strange fight here. We got Chidi Njokuani taking on Jake Matthews. Kind of binary. Chidi, another guy who recently moved down in weight, 3-fight win streak since moving down to 170 pounds. Did miss weight by a half pound, but notably looked okay. And I kind of said going into this week, if you miss weight, I probably don't want to back him, but he looked good enough that I'm still slightly on the Chitty side. At the same time, Matthew does have a path to victory here, but Matthews is another one of these fighters who you don't know which version of him you're going to see. Similar to Petrino, Kennedy, who we'll talk about in a little bit. There's a lot of fighters on this card who are volatile. The best version of them is excellent. The worst version of them is terrible. Which version of Jake Matthews do we get here? I don't know. Only the one takedown against Phil Rowe, a fight where he probably should have leaned on that a little bit more. Not a guy who shoots often, but he probably should. Matthews has grown up with the UFC. I mean, this guy has been in the promotion for years, still pretty young too, but he's taken a lot of damage. He's been in a lot of wars. Cheaty, with the weight cut, I do have some concerns about his durability, but just a much, much better striker. So yeah, I mean, I am slightly on the Chitty side here. I think he gets it done. I will say Matthews is another live dog if you're looking for value, but where these guys are priced, I definitely prefer to be on the Njokuani side. I think if there is a finish in this fight, unless Chitty's weight cut was way worse than it looked, I do prefer the Chitty side as well. A lot of sharp people are divided on this fight that I've talked to this week, though. Again, Matthews has the clear path to victory, but we've seen it in a lot of fights where he should be taking opponents down. He doesn't even try to go there. Tries to stand and trade, kind of fallen in love with his hands to the point that it's to his detriment a little bit. Very inconsistent fighter. Chidi on the 3-fight win streak. This is kind of a step down coming off the Zaleski dos Santos win. At the same time, stylistically, definitely a different type of matchup. So I'm on Chitty here. Am I confident? Not necessarily. I do think there's some value on him on the money line. The line closed a bit after the weight miss, but I think he looks fine. When they faced off, no real issues here. And yeah, let me just make sure I haven't kind of ripped through any of these graphics without. Yeah, Petrino, again, looks good in OF Index. The upside's there. Again, I just think he's a little bit overowned. Highest projected ownership, we see him there at 35%. Tafa, very popular as well. I mentioned I do like him. At the same time, I think Tokkos is live. So if you're looking for leverage, the rest of your lineup's chalky. Maybe that's someone you could go to. Next fight here. Oh, no. Was talking to Derek before the show. And before I do this, I'll check out the chat here. Appreciate you guys. Again, even if you are watching this after we're live, get your questions in. And we will be answering them in the comments. That helps us get this video in front of more people. And for us to keep doing these free UFC videos, we need you guys to keep tuning in. So definitely appreciate you. Again, any questions, whether they're betting related, matchup related, DFS related, either site, happy to kind of talk through those. Feel free to shoot them over. But making good pace for once. So let's keep it going. We got Lauren Murphy here against Eduardo Moura. Really another fight where we have an old fighter taking on a young fighter, an old fighter who has much better experience taking on a young fighter who probably, given the recent activity, is the rightful favorite. Murphy, more than anything, is a junkyard dog, right? We've seen her take crazy damage. It took Valentina a long time to finish her, ate a billion strikes in that fight. Upset Miesha Tate. I think that was Tate's return fight to the UFC. Got battered and bruised against Andrade, but did well to last until the scorecard. Still had 100 significant strikes. And on the feet here, I do think she could be competitive. Eduardo Moura, pretty interesting prospect. I actually do rate her win over Veronica Hardy pretty highly, if I'm being completely honest. Hardy is undersized for the division, but she's super technically sound, has Dan Hardy in her corner, one of the better minds for the sport, in my opinion. The loss over to Denise Gomes, I mean, kind of is what it was. Gomes, decent prospect. But yeah, I think Moura here, if she grapples, will cover her price as the favorite. If she doesn't, Murphy, a live underdog if you're looking. But at 9,500, I am having some trouble getting to her. At the same time, the field is as well. But looking at statistics, Moura over 4 takedowns per 15 minutes, 35% accuracy, decent striking defense. Murphy's going to out volume her on the feet. But yeah, I think Moore is probably going to be able to secure the takedown she needs to edge out a decision. Is that enough for me to pay 9,500? Probably not. If Murphy's anything, she's durable. I do think she has enough grappling defense on the mat to probably stay safe. So yeah, I'm not crazy about this matchup. We'll talk about the other girl fight in a few. I actually think that one's way more interesting than this one in terms of DFS. But yeah, Murphy, I know Derek, shouts out the plug again. Definitely get access to that. Check the links in the description. Get access to that, the model, the ownership, the lineup builder. I know he's a little bit interested in Murphy at this price. And again, we saw it with Brian's big win last week. If a fighter can just last to the cards, get a bunch of strikes in, especially on FanDuel, they're going to be pretty interesting if not a lot of the other dogs dogs are hitting. Again, I think there's enough dogs on this card that I don't need to play much Lauren Murphy, but she's taken on the better opponents. Has she been losing? Yes, but to who? Andrade Shevchenko, former champions. I mean, wins over Tate and Joanne Wood, definitely better than anything that we see on Moura's resume. Again, it's just two fighters whose careers kind of moving in different directions. I believe just under an 11-year age gap here in this one. So I like Moura. I don't like the price, though. Wouldn't be tying her into parlays aggressively or anything like that either. But yeah, I do think she can lean on her grappling to get it done. Another very binary matchup here between Walter Walker and Kennedy Njokuani. Forgive me if I'm mispronouncing that. But yeah, shouts out to Derek here. We got an excerpt from the MMA plug, so a little free tidbit here for you. Expect a lot more stuff like this if you do get behind the paywall. That article is massive. It's excellent. But if you're into narratives, Nzechukwu has been really drilling things on the map. There's been a ton of circulation on social media, him rolling a ton, working on his jiu-jitsu. Not only is that a good sign that he's taking his fight and his training really seriously, but in theory, this should help him in confidence when trying to keep with Walker on the feet. So that's important, right? Walker coming off 2 wins via heel hook, one of the better submission grapplers at heavyweight. Not that that's saying much. Terrible striker, though. Slow and plotty on the feet. The younger or older, I don't know, brother of Johnny Walker, absolutely a different type of style, though. Can't really hang on the feet with many fighters, but he's so good on the mat that, not that he's that great, but it's just so many heavyweights are terrible on the mat. I will say Kennedy is better than the guys he's been submitting with ease. Kennedy, again, I talked about Tokkos fighting at a kill cliff. Kennedy is fighting out of Fortis with Saif Sayoud, really solid coach in my opinion. Definitely going to know what they need to do here, and that is sprawl and brawl, keep this fight standing. I like Kennedy to get it done. At the same time, Walker has such a clear path to victory on the mat via the submission that he's probably worth mixing in. He's more popular than Kennedy, at least on DK, I believe on FanDuel as well. So this is a situation where the favorite is creating leverage for you. I do think Kennedy gets it done, but if he's taken to the mat, you're going to be holding your breath. So just keep that in mind. Really, again, another binary fight. One I can certainly see going either way. Another plug, guys. At the end of the video, I will do a quick build here on DK, maybe on FanDuel as well if we have time. I forgot that last time. But again, the show's a work in progress. Any input, definitely comment. I really appreciate you guys. The widest line fight on the card, I believe, here we have Mike Davis taking on Mitch Ramirez. Mike Davis, disappointing last time out against a pretty good opponent in Fares Zian. Just didn't really look like himself. Apparently, that fight in Abu Dhabi, one of the locker rooms had fresh paint, and all the fighters were like inhaling the fumes to the point that they were kind of like woozy. And apparently, it affected Davis more than anyone else. He still fought to a competitive decision. Other than that loss, I mean, his only losses have come against the likes of a Gilbert Burns. I think even earlier in his career, there was another big loss to someone. I can't remember who, but regardless, I mean, he's been taking on the better level of competition. Guy is super well-rounded, underrated grappler, technical striker, excellent Muay Thai. He's taking on a guy here in Mitch Ramirez who I just don't rate all that highly. I mean, Mitch is tough, kind of kill or be killed, but KO'd by leg kicks against Thiago Moises, obviously not the best look. When he broke into the UFC, not really a fighter I had circled to do anything. Yeah, Carlos Paredes KO'd him on Contender Series. Tough to glean much from that, though, obviously, given how good Paredes is. But I do think Davis gets it done. We're here talking about all these expensive plays. To me, in this range, Davis, if he's not going to be as popular as Teixeira, as Petrino, as some of the others, I do really like his upside. I think he has the ability to find the finish here, especially coming with a loss. He should be locked in. Kind of known as an inactive fighter, too. He's actually returning here quicker than he usually does. So just checking a lot of boxes for me is Mike Davis. I do have him in a best bet, which we'll talk about in a minute. Then one more fight here. Again, making excellent time today, guys. Appreciate you. Fatima Kline, massive, massive favorite here against Melissa Martinez. Kline really did her paid her dues, for lack of a better phrase, in LFA and Invicta on the regional scene, kind of working her way up against really solid level of competition. Martinez, not so much. Mexican fighter, she's tough, she moves forward. But at the same time, I mean, I just haven't been all that impressed by her. At least Reed, small fighter, able to take her down a few times, beat her via decision. That win over Ardeline was a very narrow fight I could have seen going either way. And the big hole in her game is the grappling. I think Kline would be insane not to lean on that here. Kline, one of the training partners, I think maybe more than that, Aaron Blanchfield. But yeah, I mean, 100% takedown accuracy so far in the UFC. Obviously, very small sample, 2 fights. But the most impressive thing about Kline, not even that win over Dudakova, in her debut, up a weight class against Jasmine Juice, the vicious fighter who has really done well and is really climbing the rankings now. She was competitive. I think Martinez would get steamrolled by Juice, the vicious, in the first round. Again, we don't want to play too much MMA math, but Kline, another fighter to me who I want to get exposure to, especially if she's a little bit lower owned than some of the other expensive fighters. So Kline and Davis, are they expensive? Yes. Are they huge money line favorites? Yes. Do I want to be parlaying them on those money lines? Probably not. But there are some bets on them that I'll talk about in just a minute. And again, just to recap the ownership here, Garcia 46% owned, Teixeira 42, Petrino 35, Tafa 33, Walker 33. And again, you get access to the model, you get the ownership for every fighter, not only on DK but on FanDuel as well. Top plays in the model in terms of index, and again, this is more upside than anything. Teixeira 175, Davis, who we just talked about, 129, Petrino 108. But again, you got to kind of look at who is the upside and who's popular, and kind of find yourself somewhere in the middle. And again, I think we're all kind of into Kennedy here, although the Walker sub is kind of live as a scary upset. Let's check out the chat here. Any must-haves, Don? This is kind of a tricky one. I don't know. Must-have, I almost want to say no. I think like looking at DK, I'll say this, and this is kind of a cop out. Is there a must have fighter? No. Are there must have fights? Yes, probably. And last week I said this about Royale and Van. I said any lineup you have, you should have one of these guys. Turns out the optimal was having both, but I kind of feel that way this week about Lewis and Teixeira. I think you want one or the other. I do not want to stack that fight though, so just keep that in mind. But again, I think if there's something you must have on this card, it's probably one of those two. I will say Garcia looks great for his upside at his price. I am going to be on Kattar pretty heavily as an underdog. Not a spot I'm going to go all in on. But yeah, I do think that fight's another good one. Landwehr, one of my favorite dogs. Could he get starched early by Morgan? Certainly. But as that fight wears on, I think he could pay off value. But again, no must-have fighter. But if there's a must-have fight, it probably is the main event. And again, I think Lewis is a little bit lower owned than maybe he should be. Let's go here, guys. Let's get into some of my best bets. And yeah, when I'm talking best bets, I want to kind of be clear here. Nothing in MMA is 100% safe. This card is volatile, but I don't want to be playing these massive money favorites. I don't want to parlay 6 -1000s and hope that nothing crazy happens. I try to get value, and when I'm talking about best bets, I try to get under -200 or better. So what I'm seeing here is value. Do I think these are all locks and guaranteed? No, certainly not. But in kind of combing through the entire card, looking for value, these are 4 bets that really stood out to me. So first we have Fatima Kline here, minus 1100, 1200 favorite, depending on what book you're looking at. KO or submission line, about even money. I think she's going to be able to get the takedowns. I think she has the submission ability to win by submission, but also the ground and pound's very alive here as well. I just think she's going to outclass Martinez on the mat to the point that she should be able to find the finish. It's women's MMA. Things are volatile, but all the more reason to find a price closer to even money. You don't want to lose a parlay with her in it, minus 1200. That's not even really boosting your payout. So just keep that in mind. Another one I really like, I do like Davis here over Ramirez. He's been a little bit inconsistent lately, though. I think the safest way to maybe go about this one, instead of playing Davis minus 900, minus 1000, depending on your book, is to just go under 2.5 rounds, minus 180. A little bit juicier than maybe we want, but if something crazy happens, I think Ramirez's only path is probably via finish. Not that I'm expecting that to happen. But Davis, again, just so much better than his opponent that he's lined minus 1000. We're getting value on the inside. And sometimes these burn us, but in these particular matchups, I think stylistically, this is a place I want to go. Another one I like in terms of value, Walker against Njokuani. Fight does not go the distance. That's what that acronym means, excuse me. Or fight not to see the scorecards, depending on your book. Minus 160 to me. Again, binary matchups tend to find finishes. If Walker's going to win, he needs to get this fight grounded. He needs to find the submission. If he doesn't, I think the gap in the striking is very wide here. Kennedy should be able to find the finish. In that same breath, I'm not so confident here just because Kennedy, we've seen it against guys like Oven St. Peru, just kind of binding his P's and Q's a little bit too much, but I think the striking gap here is wide enough that he should be pretty aggressive. And to Derek's point in his write-up, I mean, his whole camp has been kind of the grappling defense, so I like that a lot. And then again, Calvin Kattar money line. maybe I'm left holding this L. Oh wait, I already changed the side, but plus 102 for just a very talented fighter who just changed gyms. I know he's lost lately, but it's against elite fighters, former champions, guys like Aljamain Sterling. Everyone's thinking Garcia is going to find the KO. The only time Calvin's been KO'd was via knee injury. We saw him eat a billion shots against Holloway, take some serious shots from Josh Emmett in a fight I actually thought he won. I just see value here. I think this fight could go either way. So to see him at plus for me is just straight up value. I like him. Long shots and yeah, bet less on these. These are riskier for sure. But Landwehr, I just think the line's a little bit too wide. Plus 210. Again, you can maybe hedge, take like, and I actually saw, I think the line at decision only is around like minus 110 or something on Landwehr. That's pretty safe. Kind of protects that chin if you don't trust it. But for me, I'd rather just take a shot on the money line again in front of his home crowd here. Charriere fights the level of his opponent. If it's close, or even if Charriere should win, who's to say they don't give it to Nate because he has the crowd behind him? So I like him on the money line. Chitty by KO or submission. I don't think he has a submission, but the KO line's like plus 240. I don't want to just risk a club and sub for 15 cents. So same with Curtis. Again, just don't get too cute. I would bet them both by KO if I could only pick one. But when the lines are so close between KO and submission, it's wise to just take both when you're getting them for such a discount. Curtis as well here by KO or submission. Again, I think he could find the chin of Griffin before this one's over. Not as confident here as I am in Chitty, but again, these are all long shots, so proceed with some caution. And Lewis, yeah, can he get starched early? Which version of him shows up, I don't know, but I do think he's a little bit disrespected on this money line plus 245. And yeah, maybe these guys kind of stand. Teixeira isn't as aggressive as usual. His first main event, big step up in competition, and this fight goes long, so you're covered here. The Derek Lewis KO line's like plus 260. So again, just don't get greedy when you're playing these props. If you could get a little bit of extra outcome, a few more outs, as we use in the poker world, just uh, don't get greedy again. Um, Quick build here, guys, and we'll get out of here. Once again, really appreciate everyone. Mark, good question. Leaving cash on the table, not too contrary. Yeah, so first I'll say this. Next week, we got a pay per view card, right? There's a ton of huge favorites, not a lot of underdogs that I think are live. On a card like that, I would try to leave some cash on the table. On a card like this, though, where I think there's live underdogs in most of the matchups, it's tough for me to want to do that. I think there's other ways to get contrarian again, leverage the ownership that we have in the model. It's a quick way to get different, but at the same time, it's not rare in MMA to see people leaving cash on the table. I'll say this just kind of as a rule of thumb on cards where you like a lot of underdogs, use most of your salary. On cards where you don't, leave some cash on the table to get different. That's kind of my philosophy. But yeah, I wonder how much Brian left on this lineup. I don't think it was much because Taporia was expensive. McKinney was crazy expensive. So again, if we like dogs, not always wise to leave too much on the table. But yeah, let's go ahead and build. So I think if we're going with the model, right, I don't want to go too against what we're doing here at Occupy, right? So as much as I like Lewis on the money line, I think we want one of Teixeira or Lewis in most lineups. Um, so how do we do this? On FanDuel, we'll go Teixeira captain. On DK, we'll go with Lewis. And if you're playing one lineup each site, I mean, it's never crazy to hedge in these volatile fights. And like I said, I don't think there's a must have fighter on this card. I do think this is a must have fight. I do think Teixeira is probably the rightful favorite. I think he has the higher ceiling, but point per dollar, I do like Lewis. I mentioned I think Davis is under owned if I'm looking for something to pay up for. In this range, I think if you're playing cash games, you're going to see Garcia as one of the more popular plays. He makes a lot of sense. But again, I'm going to play my dogs here. And this is a large field, high risk type build. Just keep that in mind. Chitty, I think a lot of us like Kennedy. And where does that leave us? 8-2. Maybe you can't get to Kennedy. Let's see. Tafa, Garcia, Matthews. I don't know. If you want to get really crazy with it, you go Landwehr and get up to Petrino. I mean, something like that. If you want to leave a little bit of salary, I don't like the price on Moura. What if we go Kline? What are we looking at for value? I don't think there's anything. Griffin, Thompson. It wouldn't be crazy to go to Thompson. I know Derek likes Murphy a little bit. Just trying to balance this out, right? It's tough to fit Kline and Davis. I'll say that. Tafa's fine. I think he has upside because of the KO. We already have Kattar, so we don't want to go with that. Ugh. See, the pricing is this way for a reason. It shouldn't be that easy to build. Um, I don't know. I like Tafa more than Tokkos, but if we go Tokkos, that gives us something like, I don't know, Bonfim or Curtis. Bonfim's going to have the grappling going, but will he find the finish? I don't know. I do think he has more upside. Something like this. And again, I don't love the Tokkos play. Like, I'd be trying to find a way around that. Maybe we just pull him for Nate to train. Something like this, 400 on the table. Taking some risks here for sure. But again, large field, you got to take risks. Over on FanDuel, where we're using Teixeira as the captain, obviously we will not be playing Lewis, so we're going to need to find some value, right? Let's see. I don't want to use the same underdogs if I can help it. It was kind of tough not to, though. Just looking at pricing. Again, if Kattar gets finished, I'm going to have a rough night. Landwehr could as well. Let's start in this mid range. We go Chidi, Tafa. Curtis, I think, is much more appealing on FanDuel. I don't know. We went Chidi already. I guess we go Kattar again. Not crazy about that, honestly. I don't want to use him on everything. I mean, Walter could get the sub. I'm not crazy about it. I mean, Thompson, just a vet, if he can keep it standing at 11, could be worth having. Do I feel great about it? No, but that way we could get Kennedy in there. And again, look at Brian's lineup last week with Hines. I mean, if one of these really cheap guys lasted a decision, like if Petrino doesn't knock out Austin Lane, even at $10, Lane could be in the optimal with a score like that, like 55 points. A couple takedowns. I mean, he could get there even easier than Hines did. Something like this, I don't hate. And then we could even upgrade Kennedy to something even safer if we think Petrino or Bonfim are. You would not want to do it with Lane and Bonfim because of the same fight. But yeah, I'd leave Kennedy, honestly. I think this is a pretty good build. But again, building for a high risk contest, obviously use the model. I'll run through the videos here. And yeah, Brian saying it. I mean, I just had Lane, which is probably a worse idea than this, but run back to Hines angle with Murphy. I mean, I do think both of them are kind of in a similar spot in that if the heavy favorite is winning, they're getting their grappling going and they're going to score pretty poorly. So yeah, I mean, looking at this group, I mean, Griffin could score okay. I do think Murphy, though, for the price, someone who landed 100 significant strikes on Jessica Andrade, even in the loss, especially on FanDuel, could score tremendously well. Again, high volume striking on FanDuel carries you further than it does on DK. If you trust Lane's chin, Murphy, a great pivot there as well. So something like this. And again, I don't love all these plays, but you're not going to love all of them. It's kind of the game. It's MMA. It's not easy. I'll recap all the graphics here, guys. Once again, just want to plug the channel. Obviously, like, subscribe, leave comments below, leave your questions as you think of them. This video is evergreen until the fights go live tomorrow. So unlike some of the NBA stuff we do, it's a little bit more of a shelf life, but get access. Again, occupyfantasy.com. You get the full breakdown, the plug. We saw Derek's blurb about Kennedy. Lots of that in there about almost every fight, or at least a fighter from each. You also get access to the model where you're going to be able to see the ownership, the top OF index plays, which is a proprietary model. And yeah, that extends across multiple sports. I know I'm going to be hopefully sweating MLB when I get off this video, but really, really do appreciate you guys. Again, my best bets quickly here: Fatima by KO or sub, Davis versus Ramirez under 2.5, Walker Kennedy no distance, Kattar money line, longer shots. Proceed with caution. Landwehr, Chitty by KO, Curtis by KO, or sub, Derek Lewis money line. But should be a fun card. We're going to be back with a pay-per-view next week. I believe it's Dustin Poirier's retirement fight. Not the most loaded pay-per-view, but it is a pay-per-view. So we got some good matchups. Also this month, we got that awesome Abu Dhabi card, which is a fight night. So a lot to look forward to, guys. And if you want more of these videos, like, subscribe. You can follow me on Twitter at Nick Morrow DFS. I actually do have my own write-ups going up tomorrow for the fights as well. But really, really appreciate you. Love being with Occupy. Love the group here. And behind the paywall, you get all the goods, much lower price entry than our competitors. So all the more reason to get there. Love you guys. Let's crush it. Hope to see more screenshots. Shouts out Brian on that AK. Unfortunately, didn't stack that fight, but model was on point, man. Van and Roy Val both scored tremendously. And yeah, Van and Kattar about as sharp as it gets. So take care, everyone. Good luck. Appreciate you. Have a great evening.